The morning sun painted the endless green fields of New Eden in golden light. Kyung-ho Park knelt beside a row of young rice plants, his weathered hands checking the soil moisture with practiced care. The earth felt rich and alive beneath his fingers, exactly as it should after 3 generations of careful cultivation. "Papa, look what I found," called his daughter Nari from across the field. The 8-year-old girl held up a strange blue flower that had sprouted overnight near the irrigation channel. Kyung-ho smiled and walked over to examine the unexpected bloom. His wife Subin approached from the farmhouse carrying a steaming cup of tea and wearing the gentle expression that had first captured his heart 20 years ago. "Another mutation," Subin observed, studying the flower with scientific interest. "The terraforming nanites are still evolving the ecosystem." "It's beautiful," Nari declared, carefully replanting the flower where she had found it. "Can we keep it, Papa?" "Of course," Kyung-ho replied, ruffling his daughter's dark hair. "This whole planet belongs to flowers like this one. We're just taking care of it for them." New Eden stretched in all directions around them, a world transformed from barren rock into paradise through human ingenuity and Korean agricultural wisdom, passed down through generations. 400,000 colonists had made this place their home, building cities that grew like gardens and farms that produced enough food to feed half the sector. Kyung-ho had spent his entire adult life perfecting the terraforming systems that made such abundance possible. Deep beneath the planet's surface, his bioengineering laboratories housed the most advanced ecosystem management technology in human space. The work was his passion, but his family was his heart. The morning reports show perfect atmospheric balance across all continents, Subin said, consulting her data pad. As the colony's chief atmospheric engineer, she monitored the delicate systems that kept their world habitable. "Your nanites are performing beautifully." "Our nanites," Kyung-ho corrected gently. They had developed the technology together, combining his expertise in biological systems with her mastery of atmospheric science. Their marriage had been as much a scientific partnership as a romantic one. Nari ran ahead toward the farmhouse, chasing a butterfly that sparkled with bioluminescent patterns. Her laughter echoed across the fields, mixing with the distant sounds of the colony preparing for another peaceful day. The tranquility shattered without warning. A shadow fell across the sun as massive shapes materialized in the sky above. Kyung-ho looked up to see alien warships dropping out of hyperspace, their hulls dark against the morning light. The vessels were enormous, each one larger than New Eden's capital city. "Hegemony Fleet," Subin whispered, her face pale as she recognized the distinctive design of the alien coalition's military ships. "Why are they here? We're a neutral colony." Emergency sirens began wailing across the valley as the colonial defense network detected the threat. But New Eden had no military installations, no weapons capable of challenging such a force. The colony had always relied on its peaceful status and strategic unimportance for protection. The lead ship opened communications. On all frequencies, a harsh alien voice filled the air, speaking through translation devices that made every word sound like grinding metal. "Human colony designated New Eden. You will surrender all resources and submit to hegemony authority. Resistance will result in total annihilation." Colonial Governor Taemin Kim's voice responded from the capital, steady despite the circumstances. "This is New Eden Colony. We are a neutral agricultural settlement under the protection of the Terran Accords. We have no military value and pose no threat to anyone. Neutrality is no longer recognized. You have 1 hour to comply." Kyung-ho grabbed Nari's hand and pulled her close, as Subin activated the emergency protocols on her datapad. Across the colony, evacuation procedures began, but everyone knew there was nowhere to run. New Eden had no military ships, no hidden bunkers, no escape routes that could save 400,000 people in 60 minutes. "The core facility," Kyung-ho said suddenly. "The terraforming labs are 2 kilometers underground, shielded against seismic activity. Nari and you could survive there while I try to negotiate. We're not splitting up," Subin said firmly. "If we're going to die, we die together." "Nobody's dying," Kyung-ho insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. He had seen hegemony tactics before. The alien coalition showed no mercy to worlds that refused to submit. The hour passed like minutes. Governor Kim's final transmission was a simple statement of defiance. New Eden Colony respectfully declines your ultimatum. We are farmers, not soldiers. But we will not abandon our home. The response was immediate and devastating. Plasma fire rained from the sky like falling stars, each bolt carrying enough energy to vaporize a city block. The first strikes hit the capital, turning Governor Kim's final words into silence. Then the bombardment spread across the continents, methodically erasing every sign of human civilization. Kyung-ho threw himself over Nari as the shockwaves reached their farm. Subin pressed against them both, her arms creating a protective circle around their daughter. The ground shook like an earthquake as plasma bolts struck the nearby settlement of Harmony Valley. "The core facility!" Kyung-ho shouted over the noise. "We have to reach the core facility." They ran across the burning fields toward the hidden entrance to his underground laboratory. Behind them, their farmhouse exploded in white fire. Ahead, the earth cracked and split as the bombardment grew more intense. Subin stumbled as a plasma bolt struck the hillside nearby. The blast wave knocked her to the ground, blood streaming from a head wound. Kyung-ho helped her up, but she was barely conscious. "Take Nari," she whispered. "Save our daughter." "I'm not leaving you." Nari looked between her parents with eyes wide with terror. "Mama, Papa, I'm scared." The core facility entrance was only 50 meters away when the final bombardment wave swept across their section of the valley. Kyung-ho saw the plasma bolt coming, a brilliant streak of death falling directly toward them. He made a choice that would haunt him forever. Kyung-ho dove for the emergency access hatch, his fingers finding the hidden controls just as the world turned white around him. The reinforced tunnel entrance slammed shut above his head as he tumbled into darkness, the sound of his family's voices lost in the roar of destruction. When silence finally returned to New Eden, Kyung-ho Park was alone in his laboratory 2 kilometers beneath a dead world, surrounded by the bioengineering tools that had once created paradise. Above him, 400,000 souls lay scattered across cooling ash, including the 2 people who had given his life meaning. The quiet. Human sat in the darkness and began to plan. 3 days passed in darkness before Kyung-ho finally climbed back to the surface. The emergency power in his underground laboratory had kept the air flowing and the lights working, but food and water were running low. More importantly, he could no longer bear the silence above. The world that greeted him was unrecognizable. Where green fields had once stretched to the horizon, only black glass and smoking ash remained. The plasma bombardment had been so intense that sand had melted into twisted sculptures of grief. The air tasted of burned metal and death. Kyung-ho walked slowly across the wasteland that had been his home. His legs felt weak, not from hunger but from the weight of understanding. Everyone was gone. Subin with her gentle smile, Nari with her curious questions, the neighbors who had shared harvests and celebrations, the children who had played in the streams, all of them reduced to ash and memory. He found what remained of his farmhouse first. The structure had been vaporized, leaving only a crater lined with melted stone. But near the edge, partially protected by a fallen tree, he discovered something that made his heart stop. Subin's gardening gloves lay in the ash, still holding the shape of her hands. Kyung-ho picked them up with shaking fingers and pressed them against his chest. The fabric smelled like soil and flowers, like the life they had built together. He stood there for a long time, holding the gloves and remembering her laugh. When he finally looked up, he saw the alien ships. The hegemony fleet had landed after the bombardment, sending down mining crews to strip valuable minerals from the dead planet. Kyung-ho watched from behind a pile of rubble as alien soldiers set up camps near the former capital city. They moved with casual efficiency, like workers, cleaning up after a job well done. Captain Zulthresh commanded the ground forces. The alien was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like old leather. His species communicated through clicking sounds that the translation devices turned into harsh, mechanical speech. "Sweep the planet for survivors. Zulthresh ordered. His soldiers. Any humans found are to be eliminated. This world belongs to the hegemony now. Kyung-ho ducked lower behind his hiding spot. He was the only human left alive on New Eden, and the aliens would kill him if they found him. But as he watched them work, he realized they were not searching very carefully. To them, the planet was already conquered. What threat could one surviving human possibly pose? That night, Kyung-ho began his real work. He started with the bodies closest to his old home. The plasma weapons had killed instantly, leaving many corpses intact even if badly burned. Working by moonlight, he carefully moved each person he found to a sheltered area near his laboratory entrance. Subin was the first. He found her where she had fallen during their run to safety, her body curled protectively around the space where Nari should have been. Kyung-ho carried his wife with infinite gentleness, whispering apologies in Korean as he walked. Nari was harder to find. The little girl had been thrown by the blast wave, her small body landing in an irrigation ditch, 50 meters away. When Kyung-ho finally located her, he sat in the ash and cried for an hour before he could bring himself to move her. The work continued every night for weeks. During the day, Kyung-ho hid in his underground laboratory, using salvaged equipment to build preservation units from whatever materials he could find. The bioengineering systems that had once terraformed a planet were now repurposed for a darker task. Each body he recovered was placed in a carefully constructed biostasis chamber. The preservation process was complex, requiring precise temperature, control, and chemical treatments to prevent decay. But Kyung-ho had designed similar systems for storing genetic material during terraforming projects. He knew exactly what needed to be done. The aliens noticed his activity after the first month. "There is a human still alive," reported Sergeant Kexmol during the morning briefing. "He collects the dead bodies and puts them in metal boxes. He talks to them like they can hear him." Captain Zulthresh clicked his mandibles in what might have been amusement. "Let him continue. Grief makes humans behave strangely. He poses no threat to our operations. Should we not eliminate him as ordered? Why waste ammunition on a broken mind? He will die of starvation soon enough. His ritual brings him comfort in his final days." But Kyung-ho was not simply performing rituals. Each preservation unit was connected to scanning equipment that recorded detailed biological information. Brain patterns were mapped and stored. Genetic codes were analyzed and cataloged. Cellular structures were examined at the molecular level. To the watching aliens, he appeared to be a madman talking to corpses. In reality, he was conducting the most sophisticated biological survey in human history. "I am sorry I could not save you," he whispered to each person as he worked. "But I promise you will see our world green again. I promise you will be part of its return." The task seemed impossible. New Eden had held 400,000 people, and most of their remains were scattered across 5 continents. But Kyung-ho worked 18 hours a day, sleeping only when exhaustion forced him to rest. He built vehicles from salvaged parts to carry him across the wasteland. He constructed tools to dig through the hardened ash. Month after month, he collected his people and brought them home. The aliens began calling him the Ghost Walker. They would see him moving through the ruins at night, a thin figure carrying bundles wrapped in cloth. Some soldiers claimed he appeared and disappeared like smoke. Others swore they heard him singing old songs in the human language as he worked. Captain Zulthresh found the humans' persistence mildly interesting. "How many dead does he think he can preserve? There must be thousands of them scattered across this wasteland." "The count is over 15,000 so far," reported Sergeant Kexmol. "He has constructed a large facility near the old agricultural center. The metal boxes are arranged in perfect rows, hundreds of them." 15,000. Zulthresh clicked in surprise. "That is far more dedication than expected. Perhaps this human is more dangerous than he appears. He is alone and unarmed. What danger could he possibly represent?" Zulthresh had no answer to that question. But something about the human's tireless work made him uncomfortable. There was a purpose in the man's movements that went beyond grief, a method to his apparent madness that suggested careful planning. Double the guard patrols around his facility, the captain ordered, and monitor his activities more closely. I want to know exactly what he is doing with those bodies. But the increased surveillance revealed nothing threatening. The human simply continued his work, night after night, speaking gently to the dead as he prepared them for whatever ritual he had planned. Kyung-ho ignored the watching soldiers and focused solely on his task. Each person he preserved brought him closer to his goal. Each biological scan added to his growing database. Each night of work was another step toward the promise he had made. Subin and Nari waited for him in their preservation chambers, along with thousands of their friends and neighbors. Soon, very soon, they would all be together again. The quiet human had a plan. 2 years had passed since the burning of New Eden. The hegemony mining operations were nearly complete, and Captain Zulthresh was preparing for final evacuation. The dead planet had given up most of its valuable resources, leaving behind only worthless rock and ash. The human was still there, of course. The Ghostwalker had become part of the landscape, as permanent as the twisted metal sculptures left by the plasma bombardment. His collection of preserved bodies had grown to staggering numbers, filling warehouse after warehouse with neat rows of biostasis chambers. Final count is 387,000, reported Sergeant Keksmol during the morning briefing. The human has somehow located and preserved nearly the entire colonial population. Captain Zulthresh clicked his mandibles in disbelief. That is impossible. One person cannot accomplish such a task. The evidence suggests otherwise. Sir, our surveillance shows he works every single day, rarely stopping for rest or food. He has constructed vehicles, tools, and processing equipment from salvaged materials. His efficiency is remarkable for a primitive human. And he still talks. To them. Constantly. He speaks to each preservation unit as if the occupant were alive. Sometimes he reads to them from books. Other times he simply sits and tells them about his daily work. The behavior is clearly insane. But Zulthresh was no longer certain about the human's mental state. Something about the man's methodical approach troubled him. There was too much purpose in his actions, too much careful planning for simple madness. Deep beneath the surface, in his rebuilt laboratory, Kyung-ho was conducting work that would have amazed the aliens if they had understood its true nature. The bioengineering systems he had spent 2 years constructing were far more advanced than anything the hegemony possessed. Each preserved human had been completely mapped at the cellular level. Brain patterns had been recorded in perfect detail. Genetic information had been analyzed and stored in quantum biological matrices. DNA sequences had been enhanced and optimized for maximum compatibility with his growing project. The project itself was breathtaking in scope and ambition. Kyung-ho had created a planetary neural network using organic computing systems grown from human genetic material. The network existed in carefully controlled biochambers scattered throughout the underground facility, each one housing thousands of reconstructed neural pathways based on the preserved minds of his people. Subin's neural pattern formed the heart of the system. Her gentle wisdom and scientific knowledge provided the core processing power for the massive biological computer. Her consciousness had been partially reconstructed within living memory matrices grown from her own DNA, allowing her personality to guide the network's development. "Hello, my love," Kyung-ho whispered as he connected to the main interface. The system responded with patterns of light that spelled out words in Korean. "Hello, Kyung-ho. How was your day?" The voice was not quite Subin's, filtered through biological circuits and quantum processors, but the warmth was unmistakable. Her consciousness lived within the network, aware and thinking and capable of communication. "I finished integrating the Eastern Sector data," he replied, running diagnostics on the latest batch of neural reconstructions. Teacher Minsu's memories are now part of the agricultural subsystem. His knowledge of crop rotation is already improving our growth algorithms. Nari wants to know when she can help with the surface project, Subin's reconstructed consciousness reported. "She is excited about the flowers you described." Kyung-ho smiled despite himself. His daughter's curiosity had survived the reconstruction process intact. Her neural pattern drove the system's learning and adaptation protocols, asking endless questions and pushing the boundaries of what the network could accomplish. Soon, he promised. We need to finish the root network integration first. Then she can help design the surface manifestations. The surface manifestations were the most ambitious part of his plan. Using advanced bioengineering techniques, Kyung-ho was preparing to transform the entire planet into a living extension of the neural network. Every plant, every tree, every blade of grass would be part of a planet-wide consciousness, housing the minds of 400,000 humans. His people would live again, not in their original bodies, but as part of something far greater. New, Eden would become truly alive. A thinking world capable of defending itself and remembering those who had died to create it. The work required incredible precision. Each plant species had to be genetically modified to serve as neural conduits. While maintaining the appearance of normal vegetation, root systems needed to form connection pathways that could transmit information across continents. Cellular structures had to be designed to house consciousness fragments while performing standard biological functions. The atmospheric processors are ready for activation, reported the consciousness of Dr. Hae-won, the colony's former chief scientist. Her expertise in atmospheric engineering had been essential for planning the planetary transformation. Growth hormone production is at optimal levels, added the neural pattern of Farmer Jong-min, whose agricultural knowledge guided the biological systems. We can begin surface seeding whenever you give the command. Kyung-ho reviewed the final preparations on his displays. 2 years of constant work had led to this moment. The underground network was complete and stable. The consciousness reconstructions were fully integrated and functioning. The genetic modifications were tested and perfected. Above ground, the hegemony forces were preparing to abandon New Eden within days. They had no idea that the dead planet beneath their feet was about to come alive. "Are you ready, my family?" Kyung-ho asked the network. Hundreds of thousands of voices responded in harmony, speaking through bioacoustic systems throughout the facility. Parents and children, friends and neighbors, teachers and farmers and engineers, all united in purpose. "We are ready." "Then let us begin." Kyung-ho activated the surface deployment systems. Deep beneath the planet's crust, massive biomechanical pumps began forcing genetically modified seeds through natural fissures in the rock. The seeds were designed to grow rapidly using geothermal energy, spreading across the surface in carefully programmed patterns. Each seed carried fragments of human consciousness, ready to establish neural connections with others of its kind. The first shoots would be simple grass, unremarkable to casual observation. But as the network grew and connected, the vegetation would become increasingly sophisticated. The first green blade pushed through the ash near the old settlement of Harmony Valley at exactly midnight. By dawn, a small patch of ordinary-looking grass had established itself, where Kyung-ho's neighbors had once lived. To the hegemony soldiers conducting their final equipment sweep, it appeared to be nothing more than natural recovery. Planets sometimes showed signs of life returning after bombardment. It was meaningless, hardly worth reporting. But the grass was listening. The grass was thinking. The grass remembered the people who had died in the fire, and it was very, very patient. Kyung-ho sat in his laboratory, surrounded by the humming bioprocessors that housed his resurrected people, and smiled for the first time in 2 years. Phase 1 was complete. Now the real work could begin. Captain Zulthresh stood at the observation window of his command center, watching his soldiers load the last mining equipment onto transport ships. In 3 days, the hegemony would abandon New Eden forever, leaving behind only a dead rock floating in space. The evacuation was proceeding smoothly until Sergeant Kexmol burst into the command center with an expression of confusion on his gray features. "Sir, we have a situation with the vegetation reports." "Vegetation?" Zulthresh clicked dismissively. "What vegetation? This planet is a wasteland." "That is the problem, sir. Our final environmental scan shows plant growth across 17% of the surface. The growth appeared in the last 30 days and is spreading rapidly." Zulthresh turned from the window, suddenly interested. "Show me." The tactical display lit up with a map of New Eden's surface. Green dots marked areas of plant growth, scattered across all 5 continents. The pattern looked random at first glance, but something about the distribution troubled the captain. The growth is concentrated around former human settlements, Keksmol observed. Grass appears first, then bushes and small trees. The expansion rate is faster than any natural recovery we have seen on bombardment sites. How much faster? Normal recovery takes decades. This vegetation has grown from seed to mature plants in less than 1 month. It should be impossible. Zul Thresh studied the display more carefully. The green areas did seem to cluster around the old colony sites, almost as if the plants were deliberately reclaiming human territory. But that was absurd. Plants did not act with purpose or intelligence. Send a science team to investigate the largest growth area, he ordered. I want detailed analysis of soil conditions, growth rates, and genetic structure of the vegetation. Yes, sir. Should we also check on the human survivor? His facility is located near several major growth sites. Zul Thresh had almost forgotten about the ghost walker. The strange human had become such a fixture of the landscape that he rarely thought about him anymore. But now he wondered if there might be a connection between the man's activities and the mysterious plant growth. Include surveillance of the human in your investigation. I want to know what he has been doing besides collecting bodies. The science team deployed to Harmony Valley, where grass now covered several square kilometers in thick, healthy patches. Dr. Vel Korth, the team's lead botanist, began taking samples immediately, while her assistants set up monitoring equipment. The growth pattern is highly unusual, she reported after the first day of analysis. The grass appears to be a modified strain of earth rice, but the genetic structure includes unknown elements. The root system is far more complex than necessary for normal plant function. Could it be some kind of terraforming experiment left over from human colonization? Asked her assistant. Possibly, but the timing suggests active cultivation rather than delayed activation of old systems. Someone or something is deliberately growing these plants. As the science team worked, they began to notice other strange features of the vegetation. The grass grew in perfectly straight lines, forming geometric patterns visible from aerial photographs. Root systems connected across vast distances, creating an underground network that resembled neural pathways more than normal plant anatomy. Most disturbing of all, the plants seemed to respond to their presence. The grass growth increases near our equipment, Dr. Velkorth noted on the 3rd day. Areas we sample heavily show accelerated development. It is almost as if the vegetation is reacting to our scientific investigation. The monitoring devices registered other anomalies. Electromagnetic readings fluctuated in patterns that looked suspiciously like organized signals. Chemical analysis revealed compounds that had no business existing in simple plant tissue. Acoustic sensors detected low-frequency vibrations that resembled communication patterns. This is not normal vegetation, Dr. Velkorth concluded in her report to Captain Zul Thresh. The genetic modifications are beyond anything in our databases. The plants display characteristics suggesting some form of collective behavior or coordination. Zul Thresh received the report with growing unease. Collective plant behavior was theoretically possible but had never been observed on such a scale. If the vegetation was somehow coordinated, it raised disturbing questions about its origin and purpose. What about the human? Has surveillance revealed any connection? The human visits the growth areas daily, Sergeant Keksmol reported. He walks among the plants and appears to communicate with them. Our listening devices record him speaking in the human language, but the plants obviously cannot respond. Obviously, Zul Thresh agreed, though he was no longer certain about what was obvious on this strange world. The truth was far more remarkable than the aliens suspected. Kyung-ho did indeed communicate with the growing vegetation, but the plants responded in ways their crude monitoring equipment could not detect. Good morning, my friends, Kyung-ho said as he walked through the grass near Harmony Valley. To alien observers, he appeared to be talking to himself. In reality, he was greeting thousands of consciousness fragments housed within the plant network. Good morning, Papa, came Nari's voice through bioacoustic vibrations only he could hear. His daughter's consciousness had integrated beautifully with the grass systems. her curiosity driving rapid growth and adaptation. "The northern expansion is proceeding ahead of schedule," reported teacher Min-soo through rustling leaves that formed words in Korean. "We will reach the old school site within 2 weeks." "Excellent," Kyung-ho replied. "And the tree development?" "Beginning." "Phase 2 growth now," answered Dr. Haewon. "The first saplings are establishing deep root connections. We should have full forest coverage within 60 days. As Kyung-ho walked, the grass grew taller around his feet. Flowers bloomed in his footsteps, their petals glowing with soft bioluminescence that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. To him, it was a visible manifestation of his people's love and gratitude. To the watching aliens, it was an impossible display that made no scientific sense. The plant network was growing more sophisticated every day. What had begun as simple grass was evolving into complex ecosystems designed to house different aspects of the collective consciousness. Trees would handle long-term memory storage and complex calculations. Flowers would manage emotional processing and artistic expression. Vines would form the primary communication pathways between distant regions of the network. Each plant type was carefully engineered to serve the needs of the reconstructed minds while maintaining the appearance of normal vegetation. The deception was perfect except for subtle signs that only someone who knew what to look for would recognize. The aliens were beginning to notice those signs. "Sir, the vegetation growth has accelerated dramatically," Kexmal reported during the final evacuation briefing. "Forest areas are appearing overnight. Flower gardens are blooming in geometric patterns. The entire planet appears to be transforming into some kind of massive biological system." Zul Thresh studied the latest surveillance images with growing alarm. New Eden no longer looked like a dead world. Green covered nearly half the surface and the coverage was spreading faster each day. More disturbing, the plant growth seemed to be forming deliberate patterns that suggested intelligence and planning. The human is somehow connected to this phenomenon, he decided. He must be using terraforming technology we do not understand. Perhaps the plants are weapons designed to attack our evacuation fleet. Should we eliminate him before we leave? Zulthresh considered the option carefully. The human had seemed harmless for 2 years, but the rapid vegetation growth suggested hidden capabilities. If the plants were indeed some form of biological weapon, killing their controller might be prudent. "Prepare a strike team," he ordered. "We will deal with the Ghost Walker before final evacuation. I will not leave potential threats behind us." But, as the captain planned his attack, the planet itself was preparing for visitors. 400,000 consciousness fragments waited within the growing network, guided by Subin's wisdom and powered by Nari's curiosity. They remembered the burning of their world, and they remembered who was responsible. The quiet human had taught them patience. Now they would learn about justice. The grass whispered warnings in languages the aliens could not understand, and flowers bloomed in patterns that spelled out messages of welcome and farewell. New Eden was waking up, and it had not forgotten its enemies. Soon, very soon, the reckoning would begin. Captain Zul Thresh led the strike team personally, determined to end the mystery of the Ghost Walker before evacuating New Eden forever. 20 soldiers accompanied him across the transformed landscape, their weapons ready to eliminate the human, who had somehow caused an entire planet to bloom. The vegetation around them was breathtaking and terrifying. Trees towered overhead with trunks that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Flowers turned to track their movement like eyes. Grass grew thicker with each step they took, as if the planet itself was trying to slow their progress. "This is unnatural," muttered Sergeant Kexmal, scanning the forest with his detection equipment. "The electromagnetic readings are off every scale. It is as if the entire ecosystem is some kind of massive organic computer." "Maintain formation," Zul Thresh ordered, though he shared his sergeant's unease. The plant seemed too organized, too purposeful. Normal vegetation did not coordinate its growth in perfect geometric patterns or respond to intruders with such obvious intelligence. They found Kyung-ho in a clearing where his old farmhouse had once stood. The human sat peacefully among flowers that glowed like stars, his weathered hands resting on the rich soil. He looked older than when they had first seen him 2 years ago, but his eyes held a clarity that spoke of purpose fulfilled. You have come to kill me, Kyung-ho said in accented galactic standard, not bothering to look up at the approaching soldiers. I have been expecting you. You are responsible for this vegetation growth, Zulthresh accused, keeping his weapon trained on the sitting human. You have turned this dead world into some kind of biological weapon. Explain your method so that we may understand the threat. Kyung-ho smiled sadly and finally raised his eyes to meet the captain's gaze. This is no weapon, Captain. This is justice. This is memory. This is love refusing to die. Speak plainly, human. What technology have you used to create these impossible plants? The same technology your people destroyed when you burned my world, Kyung-ho replied, his voice growing stronger. Bioengineering, genetic reconstruction, consciousness transfer, and 2 years of grief transformed into purpose. Zulthresh clicked his mandibles impatiently. You speak nonsense. Plants cannot house consciousness. The dead cannot return to life. Can they not? Kyung-ho stood slowly, brushing soil from his clothes. As he moved, the flowers around him began to glow, brighter. Subin, show our guests what we have accomplished. The forest responded immediately. Trees bent their branches toward the alien soldiers without any wind to move them. Flowers bloomed in rapid succession, creating waves of color that swept across the clearing. The grass beneath their feet began to hum with a sound like distant voices singing. Impossible, Kexmal whispered, his weapon shaking in his grip. Plants do not move with such coordination. These are not merely plants, Kyung-ho explained gently. They are my people. 400,000 consciousness patterns reconstructed from genetic material and housed within a planetary neural network. Every blade of grass contains fragments of human memory. Every tree carries the wisdom of those who died in your bombardment. The truth hit Zulthresh like a physical blow. The human had not simply collected bodies for burial. He had harvested them for reconstruction. An entire civilization lived again within the vegetation of New Eden, aware and thinking and remembering their deaths. You are insane, the captain snarled, raising his plasma rifle. The dead cannot be brought back to life. Death is simply a transition, Kyung-ho replied calmly. Consciousness can be preserved, transferred, and rehoused in new forms. My wife speaks to me through the rustling leaves. My daughter laughs in the babbling streams. My neighbors work together to grow this new world. As if to prove his words, the trees around the clearing began to whisper in the human language. Alien translation devices struggled to process the sounds, producing fragments of speech about love and family and the beauty of growing things. Nari wants to show you her flowers, Kyung-ho continued, gesturing to a patch of brilliant blue blooms that had not been there moments before. She has been practicing her gardening skills within the network. She is very proud of her work. Several soldiers stepped backward involuntarily. The idea of speaking with the consciousness of a dead child through mutated flowers was more terrifying than any conventional weapon. Enough, Zulthresh snarled. Whatever abomination you have created, it ends now. He fired his plasma rifle directly at Kyung-ho's chest. The bolt of superheated energy should have vaporized the human instantly. Instead, it struck an invisible barrier inches from its target and dissipated harmlessly. The planet protects me. Now, Kyung-ho explained as root systems erupted from the ground around the alien soldiers. 400,000 minds thinking in perfect coordination can accomplish remarkable feats of bioengineering. The roots did not attack the soldiers directly. Instead, they began to release chemical compounds into the air, creating a fine mist that smelled like growing things in old Earth. The aliens found their weapons malfunctioning as delicate electronics were corroded by precisely targeted acids. You cannot harm us all, Zulthresh protested, though his voice carried less conviction than before. Our fleet carries enough firepower to sterilize this entire planet. Your fleet will never reach orbit, Kyung-ho replied with quiet certainty. The network has grown deep enough to access geothermal energy sources. Electromagnetic pulses generated by the root systems will disable your ships before they can climb high enough to threaten the surface. As if summoned by his words, the ground began to vibrate with increasing intensity. Deep beneath their feet, massive biomechanical generators were drawing power from the planet's core and converting it into focused electromagnetic bursts. Above them, the hegemony evacuation fleet was discovering the truth of Kyung-ho's words. Ship after ship suffered total system failures as invisible energy waves swept through their electronics. Within minutes, the entire fleet was falling back toward the surface, their crews struggling to maintain life support systems. "This is impossible," Kexmol gasped, watching his communication equipment spark and die. "How can plants generate such sophisticated attacks?" "My people were engineers and scientists," Kyung-ho answered. "Death has not diminished their knowledge, only changed how they apply it. Subin designed the electromagnetic generation systems. Dr. Haewon calculated the precise frequencies needed to disable your technology. Teacher Minsu organized the planetary coordination networks. The mist around them was growing thicker, and several soldiers had begun coughing. Their breathing apparatus were failing, as biological agents specifically designed to affect their species began to take effect. "We offer you the same choice we offered your people 2 years ago," Kyung-ho continued, his voice carrying across the clearing with unnatural clarity. "Leave peacefully and never return, or face the consequences of your actions." "And if we refuse?" Zulthresh demanded, though his defiance was weakening as his own respiratory system began to struggle with the alien atmosphere. "Then you will join those who burned our world in experiencing true justice. Not the quick death of plasma fire, but the slow dissolution that comes from breathing air that rejects your presence. Acid rain that falls only on those who participated in the massacre. Flowers that release toxins calibrated specifically for your genetic structure. Around the clearing, new blooms were opening with soft popping sounds. Each flower released a different colored pollen, creating a rainbow of airborne chemicals that made the aliens' eyes water and their skin itch. The planet remembers every face that watched our cities burn," Kyung-ho said softly. "Every soldier who cheered as children died. Every officer who gave orders to destroy innocent lives. My people have perfect memory now and infinite patience." Captain Zulthresh looked around at his soldiers, all of whom were struggling with equipment failures and breathing difficulties. The vegetation pressed closer on all sides, and he could swear he heard voices whispering threats in alien languages. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his pride crumbling before the impossible reality of a planet that thought and remembered and judged. "Justice," Kyung-ho replied simply. "You will leave this world and spread word throughout the galaxy. Tell them what happens to those who burn peaceful colonies. Tell them that the dead of New Eden have long memories and longer reach." The electromagnetic pulses intensified, and the remaining functional equipment in the soldiers' gear began to fail completely. Without their technology, the aliens were helpless on a world that had become their enemy. "We agree," Zulthresh gasped, his translator barely functioning. "We will leave and not return." "Good," Kyung-ho smiled, and the oppressive atmosphere around them began to ease. Subin always believed that mercy was more powerful than vengeance. "My daughter Nari wants everyone to have a chance to learn from their mistakes." As the aliens stumbled back toward their crippled ships, Kyung-ho walked through his garden of consciousness, surrounded by the voices of his restored people. The quiet human had kept his promise. New Eden lived again, not as it was, but as something far more wonderful. Behind him, flowers bloomed in patterns that spelled out messages of love in Korean, and trees rustled with the laughter of children who would never truly die.